God, that's a long latency. Let me just click this button and also click this button. There we go. Lovely. Cracking stuff. Can everyone hear me? Pop a, as usual, pop a little tick, a little shout in the box to just know that the audio is all working happily. And then, yes, that seems like it. Yeah, I'm thinking it's all coming through. Good. There's some radio silence in the chat. Everyone's sort of waiting for things to happen. Everyone can hear me. Marvellous. Right, I'm in chat and go big face. Hello, everyone. Oh, what a week we've had, eh? What a week. I hope everyone's well. We're on episode 40, the 41st episode of Rail Natter. That's quite something, isn't it? Oh, dear me. 40 episodes. Or 41 episodes. 40 official episodes. Oh, crikey. Yes, I always come in quiet, Lewis. Yeah, it's because it's quality, not quantity. It's a bit dingy in here. At some point, I'll have a light there that means that I don't look bleached out and kind of red in the face, but that's fine. I'm not worried too much about that. Oh, dear me, what a week. We're nearly we're nearly through this year, this strange year. We're rapidly approaching it. In fact, this is the last, and we'll come to this later. This is in fact the last live episode of Rail Natter this year. The last live episode of Rail Natter this year, crikey. That is quite something. Anyway, today we are talking about, let's go back to No Face. We are talking about four, actually, I've said we're talking about 4 fatal derailments that changed the permanent way for good. It's true in that I'll be talking in detail about 4 accidents, but actually I'm going to be talking about 5 fatal derailments. So I'll probably go into detail about 4 of them, but I will be alluding to 5. And I'll explain why as we go through the episode. In any case, it only remains to really crack on. It's 1902, let's get started. So what's going on in the world? Because we have to start off with the news. Of course, as is traditional, I've been trying to keep this up as frequently as I can. Let's have a look at the COVID ridership stats. The latest release comes out on Wednesday, so this is today's release. And you can see that rail during the kind of the last lockdown is pretty much flatlined. It's not great. What is that? 22% ish, 23%, and it's climbed again as lockdown has ended and things have been returning to whatever this sort of form of kind of multi-tier normality. As you can see, it's immediately started climbing again, as has bus usage and car usage once again is climbing. And as ever, you see there's an inverse relationship between car usage and cycle ridership as well. So rather depressingly, and also that dashed line that's still there from where we, if we had managed to keep on top of, had an effective test and trace, test, track and trace regime, and sort of generally kept on top of things more, and indeed probably just had overall, had a better, more rigorously upheld lockdown regime, not necessarily a stricter one, but a more logical one for people to follow, we might well have found ourselves back to full throttle by the end of the year. However, it was not to be, and as you can see, rail has just sort of petered out through the year with lack of any sort of coherent sort of plan from government to reverse the situation. And indeed, that's continued. Talking of which, we've got a question. Lots of people are saying things. We'll come on to which incidents they are shortly. David Shepherd, how does the government do what you want at Christmas period fit in with what the trains are doing? It doesn't really. There's no coherence at all across it. So I don't know what Boris has just said. I presume basically do the same, but I'm not going to shout at you if you completely flout the rules and wreck everything, but please don't, or something like that. I don't know. Something basically incoherent. And as a result, trains will continue not having anyone riding them. So, yeah. Travel by train over Christmas, I'd recommend it. It's a very busy time for the railways usually. So very busy with people travelling in the run-up to Christmas because lots of students on their way home, lots of people who kind of catch the train on their way back to families, even who would normally have the car locally, perhaps. Usually a very busy time for the railways. Let's see what happens to ridership, shall we? But I'm not holding my breath. In any case, what else is on the news? Rail investments. Oh yeah, we've got Sir John Armitt's voice. Oh, and I've put the car on in front of the subtitles. It doesn't matter really, because my plan is to just talk over this video. This is a video referring to the National Infrastructure Commission's latest report, which am I pleased to say? No, I'm not pleased to say. It's dreadful. It's an absolutely dismal report. It has managed to, no matter what it's actually saying in the report, it's been written in such a way and structured in such a way, so as to essentially provide basically it says to ditch the eastern leg of the Leeds leg of HS2, and it also says to ditch the Liverpool spur of Northern Powerhouse Rail, and actually it basically says to ditch Northern Powerhouse Rail as a fully segregated line as well. It's just dismal. It's economic. It's a report that has been written by the Treasury with pressure from Gilligan, with zero understanding of the way the rail industry, or particularly the rail network, works from a timetabling, from an operational perspective. It's been written by people who don't understand railways, and it's a report about railways. It's staggering, absolutely staggering. I cannot. So someone else has pointed out this week that Heathrow has kind of got the appeal has been accepted. So the decision to cancel or block the third runway at Heathrow has been overturned as well. So a really dismal week for transport, frankly. So this report, fundamentally, let's skip the video, this stupid video. So it's disappointing because I always hope for the best of the NIC. Theoretically, it's a good idea to have an NIC, but so far they've essentially they've just done what Treasury has told them to. I started my professional writing career by writing a piece debunking a nonsense output by the National Infrastructure Commission. They were talking about diverting, they were writing in their report to divert freight from railways onto platooned HGVs on the road. Not only is platooning a nonsense vaporware gadget ban essentially, but it's it's hugely more environmentally and socially damaging, and also just not as good for moving things around. So that wasn't a great start. That was back in the end of 2017, start of 2018. So not a great start. And I have to say, since then, I've not seen any positive out. They're slow to report, and from this page that I've got up now, they just don't know what they're talking about, which is deeply, deeply frustrating. So I've brought out this little bit of the report, which is probably typifies the kind of the problems with the whole thing, which is let me get my squishy bouton out here. Let's get the red up because it needs to be red. So this is about release capacity. So they're talking about releases, and this is their sensitivity. They're assuming. Fine, everything's built on assumptions. I don't agree with people saying, if anyone ever says, don't assume anything because it makes an ass out of you and me, which doesn't work because that's not the word assume, it's assuming, tell them they're an idiot. I had a former boss who said that, and I just blinked at him because it's nonsense. Everything we do is based on assumptions. But you have to basically try to get those assumptions right. And in this case, they've assumed that one new long-distance space is equal to one new space of commuting capacity, which is not true. It just isn't the case. Even HS2 themselves, who have done incredibly little c conservative estimates of this, estimate it at around about double that. So if the whole premise of a report looking at the value of high-speed segregation is based on half the benefit to building in new high-speed segregation to what the reality looks like, even in a most conservative estimate, the whole report is bunkum, which of course it is. Furthermore, I mean, there are loads of problems with it. There are some good things in there. They talk about rolling programs of electrification, little scatterings of good things. But given the response, given how everyone's reacted in the way they have to the way this report has been structured, it really is exactly what government need it to be, which is anything they want to say, whatever they want to say. It does not come out with a clear conclusion. It does not state, thanks to the lack of proper assessment, it does not state an understanding of the rail network. It does not state anything unequivocally, which means that Treasury lent on it to basically say, they actively in the report several times explicitly play different types of investment against each other, which is nonsense. That's just not how to proceed. Owen O'Neill has pointed out there's a section, half a page, where they hint that a through underground connection through Manchester might be a good idea. Yeah. There are, as I say, there are little bits and pieces that are good, but the challenge, little bits and pieces get lost if your overriding message is pitting different types of investment against each other. And the other thing that's hugely disappointing, that's worth highlighting in the National Infrastructure Commission, this is a picture. These are all the commissioners. So not great in terms of. Well, let's. The main issue with this is, firstly, it's not great in terms of age. I know that people who are senior are the ones who generally get onto commissions like this, but frankly, that generally means senior people mean that they've got embedded prejudices, so that's not great. But what's even worse than that, frankly, is that all of these people are attached to London universities. They're based inside the M25. They've all worked on, they've all primarily worked on London projects. I think 50% or more of them have worked on the Olympic Legacy project. These are all. This is a very London. This is a view from inside the M25 of what the UK needs. A view of what the regions need. It is just deeply frustrating, deeply frustrating, and it just leads me to the conclusion that the NIC is just a flawed institution that needs to be. Well, I think what it says is, I've always had my reservations about Armit, but what it says is that you need to stop having non-railway people deciding what railway stuff is a good idea. I know Armit was with Railtrack, but I don't think that says a lot, to be honest. In any case, the NIC report is just dismal. Really, really bad. There's one person who's northern-ish if you squint. Who is it? Is it Bridget Rosewell, or is it someone else? Bridget Rosewell is convinced that takes the view that any sort of investment is, that any sort of investment doesn't result in any economic or social returns. That's published on that front. So I always raise an eyebrow on that. In any case, today we are talking about this. We're talking about some rail incidents, and this is an image of one of them. And I thought, well, I always put this picture up because it's worth kind of paying attention to. We're going to be talking about rail incidents that have changed the permanent way for good, and not all aspects of it. Just basically, so I'll explain this after the intro credits. Actually, in any case, this is what we're going to be talking about tonight, and basically we should get started really because it's already nearly 1:15. While I've got this up, any questions on this? Because there's quite a few things coming through. Let's see. Lots of any questions. So the NIC report wants HS2 to be more London centric. Basically, they're suggesting that the whole underlying kind of premise of the report is they're coming up with the idea that regional rail is worth investing in more than long distance links, which basically comes right back to that's essentially a HS2 argument that I battle on Twitter all the time, and it comes from a deep misunderstanding of what HS2 is about. Essentially, this report has been created by people who don't understand either what HS2 is about or how the railway functions. It's just hugely disappointing. And there are some people who've said, "Oh, it's not that. It's not saying that. It's not saying that." I'm sorry if the conclusion that's been drawn by the national press, by leading politicians of both parties, and by business and lobby groups and industry lobby groups. Business leaders and industry lobby groups, if they've all come to the conclusion that it's basically canning the Eastern Leg and Northern Powerhouse Rail, that's what the report is saying. Reading between the lines isn't something that you should be doing with these reports. That should be absolutely explicit. So it's a deep failure. Am I going to do a full-length takedown video on this? Yeah, maybe in January. Let's maybe have a look at it in January, shall we? We'll pick through each page and we can say what's good and we can say what's bad. Maybe that's the thing to do. In any case, here's some whatever this is. Hopefully you can see what it is. And basically, let's crack on. Let's crack on with the episode, shall we? Welcome to tonight's. I'm promise it. Well, actually, is it going to cheer up? I don't know. Maybe it isn't going to cheer up. Actually, it's a mildly bleak episode. In any case, we're going to talk about technical things and learning and how things have got better. So yes, it is going to be a positive episode. And all it remains for me to do is kick off. Welcome to tonight's show, everyone. The Intercity 225 there, fading away. I realize it's kind of having the chirpy eye of the engine music and then the words 4 fatal derailments that change the permanent way for good. It's a little bit of a sharp contrast. In any case, here's some track. Let's bring my little face in, shall we? It's me. I'm in the corner. Hello, everyone. It is some sad rail. Yeah, you're right, Ella. This is a picture. I think that if David Shearers is with us, I think this is this is a picture that he might have taken, or certainly one of his staff have taken in Rail Engineer. I've nicked it. I'm sorry, but it's very, very, very good. And there aren't very many nice high-resolution pictures of British track that like this that aren't taken by that I don't have myself. This is Inverurie to Aberdeen, and this is the double track section. And it look at this terrific. It's a terrific picture. On one side, you've got the running line looking basically quite smooth, and on the other, you've got the recently laid G44s, fast clips. What is that? Is that cent? I can't quite read the branding marks on there, but to me, it looks it's got a vertical web, so it'll be Sen 56E1 at 56E1 rail. So that's the old the equivalent of the old 113A. This will be relevant later, folks. Write that down in your copybook. And basically, what we see here is plain line track. And the reason I'm talking about plain line track, and the reason I'm putting a picture up to explain what plain line track is because these incidents, these rail crashes that have changed the development of the permanent way, I'm focusing on ones that have occurred in plain line track. So switches and crossings, which is not plain line track, it's the other type of track. It's where lots of tracks intersect each other. Those are more complicated, and there have been lots of incidents as a result of switch and crossing failures. The thing is with switch and crossings is because they're quite complicated. Generally, they're not necessarily failures of the physical bits. Or indeed of they're generally failures of they're generally or the underlying engineering. They're generally failures of the generally failures of operations, failures of management, failures of maintenance, but ultimately maintenance failures are management failures. It's very rare that there's a maintenance failure that can be ascribed to the individual who should be doing the maintenance. Generally, they've been asking and being told not to do it. So we'll also get to that later. In any case, so I put this picture up to explain what plain line is. So there we are. The new track, people are saying, why is the new track wavy? The new track's wavy because it's been placed roughly in the correct location, and then a tamper will go through and apply the correct overall alignment according to coordinates that we give them in a nice land XML file out of my design software. They plug into WinALC and whiz through there on a tamper and make it all beautiful. In fact, there's another pass of ballast to go through over the top of that. So they've kind of put the track on top, but it's very ballast light. So they'll go through and pour, just basically drown it in ballast. Just the tops of the rails will poke up, and then they'll go through the tamp. They'll scoop a little bit. They might go around and shovel a little bit off the clips, but they'll go through and tamp the whole thing into the correct alignment, and it'll be beautiful. And in fact, they have done that. It'll be lovely. In any case, it's not too harsh a curve. It's only because it's a telephoto lens. So this picture, yes, also there's some nice... is it Ready Rock? Actually, I don't know if it is Ready Rock, but there's one of the very nice sort of track corridor widening solutions there to take the toe out of the former embankment position to widen the kind of the overall rail corridor, which is like Lego blocks with a nice kind of rockish looking facing, but actually it's just concrete and then stuff piled up behind it. It's quite nice there. Anyway, there's plenty we could look at in this fantastic high-resolution picture, but we're not going to do that. We're going to move on to this picture here, which is a picture of me. No, it's not a picture of me. It's a picture of it's some of my sketches, talking about what I do with my day job. So my day job is, it's all gone very dark. My day job is converting sort of civil engineering materials. This is basically the role of the permanent way engineer, converting civil engineering materials, steel, concrete, aggregates, and turning it into having the precision of a mechanical device so basically civil engineering and mechanical engineering combined. The interface between the wheel and the rail, as I always say, is about 5 pence piece, size of a thumbnail. So that's my day job, and that's the job of all permanent way engineers, is to make that work without causing problems. And this evening we're going to talk about the problems. It's worth me saying before we kick off that a bit of a content warning. Actually, I'm going to be talking about in some kind of detail about some pretty horrific rail incidents. It's not going to be gory, but it's the way that I describe this. I will go into some of the detail of what people on that train experienced, and there are I've got some video as well of the first incident, the oldest incident. It's worth it's just worth if you don't want to listen to that, or you've been involved in one of these incidents and you don't want to, and it's going to trigger some unpleasant memories, then maybe this isn't the episode for you. If not, if you're okay with that, then we'll press on. Yes, we're starting with Hither Green. So this is the first incident we're looking at. Why is that faded in and out? That's weird, wasn't it? Oh, that's because I've probably got animation on the text box the whole time. That's deeply annoying. You know what's great is that I can go in and just get rid of that for all these. Look, this is really good. So while I talk, I can go animations, get rid of animations. I don't want that to happen. I also don't want this to happen. Go away, get rid of that. And also this one, get rid of that. And also this one here, get rid of that. And this one as well, and get rid of that. Boom. I wonder where I nicked this from, that it did that. In any case, not relevant. Hither Green, we're starting with Hither Green, and it's kind of quite late in the evening, 9:16 p.m. on Sunday the 5th of November, 1967. And I'm essentially going to talk about exactly what happened. This is the plan. So, what time is it? We've got... let me just go in here and make sure I've got the right bits. I've got all sorts going on screen-wise. Here we are. So, the kind of the... Let me just go through here. So the course of the derailment is the bit I've got. I'm going to be referring to the crash reports throughout, by the way. So it's worth me kind of going through and explaining these in detail what's going on. So, essentially, let's go through. In fact, you know what? I can tell you the tale of what's going on here. So we've got there's the 1943 Hastings to Charing Cross train, comprised of kind of 12 coaches, with 2 6-coach diesel electric sets. It was approaching Hither Green under clear signals. It was going at about 70 miles an hour. And what happened was the leading pair of wheels of the 3rd coach struck a small wedge, which I'll show you in a second. A small wedged piece of steel had broken away from the end of a rail, and it derailed across the down fast line. And the train essentially derailed and split up, and it kind of ran on. It was going around a curve, but it ran on for about a quarter of a mile. But then it hit, as often happens, it hit a crossover. It hit some switches and crossings, which led to the train to completely derail and sort of jackknife. And that's the point at which it all destabilized and unfortunately made a big mess. Lots of couplings breaking, which meant the train sort of split apart all over the place. And the train was pretty busy, so there were passengers standing in the corridors of the corridor coaches. It was a very busy train, and so 49 passengers, actually, I think. Yeah, it was 49 passengers who were killed, and then another 78 were injured. So, these coaches were overturned. Very quickly there was a response, but it was 1967, and so the emergency services response, whilst kind of hefty, was not... and these coaches they don't have the crashworthiness of modern coaches either. So that's the reason for the significant fatalities of that huge disaster. From a rail perspective, that's an enormous number of people to be killed in a rail crash. Let's whiz over to the tiles. So I've got this very quiet, but this is a video to give you an idea of what the carnage looked like after it happened. So, trains derailing at speeds of over 50 miles an hour generally make a lot of mess. You can see twisted steel. This is them recovering the train the kind of the day after. You can see whole body panels just ripped away. Not good. It's a right. So you can see they're pouring in. Yeah, we can see. Another thing that happens often in rail crashes, if you're not familiar, is quite often the bogies will become detached. The bogies are the big lumps of metal, often up to 5 tons in weight, with the wheels attached. Those are very, very heavy, and they become projectiles when a train derails, and those often then collide with coaches, either trains coming the other direction or they get hit by the following, the coaches following. It's not a lot. I think you can see the state of the emergency service response is it's slightly different to what you see in kind of modern rail disasters, with the public are just in amongst it, kind of almost getting involved themselves and trying to help. Quite something. You can see, not a good thing to happen, and really this is the worst. This is the worst of in terms of the number of people injured and killed. This is the worst of the disasters that we're going to cover today, this evening. I just put this old newsreel in just to give an idea of. I think you can, seeing the video, you get an idea of the scale of damage that happens when trains fall off. Not good. No, here it is. It's daylight, and you can still see. You can sort of see the yeah, you can see the mess of everything. Just yeah, also some interesting footage of them moving things around, but yeah, not good. In any case, let's whiz into the pictures. Yeah, we've got the pictures of Hither Green there. So it was a pretty cold, damp day. What had happened? What had actually happened? What had caused this incident? Well, what I'm going to do is show you a picture. I'm going to put this up. This is an extract from the report, so you can all see this, hopefully. And this here is a bolted joint. You have one rail coming up to here. Let me get my pen out. Oh, I can't get my pen out. You've got one rail coming up to the end. Actually, I totally can if I do. Let me just do draw. There we go. So you've got one rail coming up to here, and you can see kind of there's the rail foot, the rail disappearing off in that direction. You've got another rail coming in this direction, doing that, going off that direction, and you've got 4 bolt holes. And onto this slots a kind of a piece of kit that looks like this. It's called a fish plate. There's an old joke that when you're a permanent way engineer, you need to know your fish plates from your dinner plates. And it kind of looks a bit like this, except that the holes are actually a bit more spaced out in the real one. And you can sort of see, here's one piece here, and here's the other piece here, and it's broken in 2. Now, actually, the fish plate breaking in 2 is a side effect of something far more important that's happened. You can see something else that's going on here, in that there's a hole here, and in fact, this is just the top of a crack. And this crack, let me get a different color out, shall I? Let me get the yellow out. This crack here this crack runs right down into here, and there's another crack that goes out there. There's another bit of the crack that goes down there, and there's another bit that disappears off like this. And this crack, if I whiz down here, you can see a picture of it. This is what the report looks like, by the way. It's a very detailed report. But it's important that I show you what the picture of the crack looks like, because it explains quite a lot. There we are. Here's another picture of the detached portion. You can see this wedge piece has essentially broken away. So this horrible looking wedge piece, there we are. I'm going to do it in red now. This piece broke apart. It rotated round, and with the wheel, kind of the wheel of the rail of the train kind of coming this direction. Essentially, the train ramped up and was derailed by this essentially what had become a ramp in the top of the railhead. Now, how had that happened? How on earth had that situation been allowed to occur, you might say? Well, let's talk about fatigue, shall we? So if I get a piece of metal and I bend that now, this is my paperclip situation. I keep not having a paperclip at easy access. It's a right old model. If I get a paperclip and bend that paperclip repeatedly, there's a draw button. Yeah, it's in. Yeah, thanks, Eli, I found it. If you get a paperclip and bend it over and over again, eventually it snaps, and you can see at the position of the snap, you can see that it gets the metal changes color. You can see the properties change. That's fatigue. That's fatigue failure. Repeated loadings to failure is fatigue. And in this situation, essentially these holes are a point of repeated loading and unloading, stressing and unstressing as the wheels pass over these joints. And it's the same for every single bolted joint across the country. And bear in mind, there were hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these joints on the network. There are about 50 joints per mile on the railway. Is that right? 50, might be 50 per kilometre. A lot of rail joints. And at this point, very little long welded rail existed on the network. This is the late 60s. The majority of track was jointed track. And so you had these joints, and across the country they're supposed to be taken apart, greased, and put back together again at a minimum annually, if not more frequently. And that greasing was supposed to maintain it as a dynamic system. The trouble is, in this situation, even with that greasing, there is some limited. Well, I tell you what. Let's read the conclusion, shall we? Let's read exactly what it says in the conclusion of the report, because it explains it nice and clearly. So this report basically kicked off a few things. One of the issues was there we are. The trouble is, this report is broken into several big bits, which is why I'm making sure I'm finding the right one before I read out. So there we go. So so they start basically after this report, they undertook to start a load of different tests, and sort of so if I we don't want Tattenhall. We'll get to that. So this is So we'll get there in a second. So Hither Green, they basically kicked off a load of tests, a load of different sort of tests into a few different things, and actually, so there were essentially 4 different strains of research after this incident. And in fact, there were other discussions as well about whether axle loads were causing a problem, because there'd been changes in the types of loading. They'd moved from rolling stock being hauled by a locomotive to these sort of suburban units on this track, and there were consideration as to whether that, the reduction in wheel sizes, all these different discussions were increasing loading. And actually found that was not a major contributing factor to this incident. In terms of permanent way, there are 4 different strains of research. The first was about the strength of rail ends, understanding how strong the ends of rails were. The second thing, which actually happened pretty quickly, was the development of a new rail profile. So in 1967, the standard rail profile for British Railways was 110A. It was a BS 110A flat bottom rail, which is essentially £110 per yard of rail. So that's the equivalent of like 52 kilograms, something like that, 52 kilograms per meter-ish. Someone else will correct me on that. In any case, those the 110A, they thickened the web to try and reduce some of the bolt hole stresses. This was an attempt. We'll get to how successful it was shortly. So we moved from 110A to 113A as the new rail section, which is the rail section that we have today, in fact. So it involved a thickening of the rail web to reduce bolt hole stresses. The next bit of kind of strain of research was into ultrasonic testing, methods for ultrasonic testing, which is where you let's see, where you if you can imagine, you've got the rail. There's the rail here. I'm looking at the rail in sort of side view. If you get a kind of a bubble of water with a sort of a sensor in the middle, and you ping sound waves through the rail, it then bounces, and kind of obviously the wheel is moving in this direction. It then bounces back and gets picked up by the sensor if it's moved on a bit. Look at this drawing; it's beautiful. Picked up by the sensor, and if you've got something like a discontinuity, like a crack or some sort of discontinuity, it'll bounce. The sound waves will bounce back quicker, and you'll get the trace will change, and there's an issue. And so research into this method of testing rails really kind of kicked off in a big way. They'd already been using ultrasonic testing, but the improvements to testing the rail in situ was accelerated kind of dramatically. There was actually a new test vehicle was commissioned pretty soon after this incident. So that was a major step forwards. And there was another bit of work, which was to increase the fracture toughness of rail steel. So up to that point, rail was quite soft. I think it's fair to say, if Dan P was on the call, he'd be able to tell us exactly what's going on. It's basically sonar, sort of, yeah. In any case, what's going on in the chat? Oh, we've got Gary Keno with us, by the way. That's good, Gary, because you're going to get a mention later. Discussions are already going on. Oh, there's some discussions of the comet crash. That's also relevant. We'll get there too. So the fourth thing was working. British Railways started working with British Steel to come up with an improved fracture toughness in the rail steel. And actually, they were looking at the crystal structure at the surface of the rail. So when you create rails, steel isn't always it's not always the same homogeneity. You have depending on how you treat the steel, it forms different types of crystal structures. Some of those are stronger than others. So depending on how you wash, water wash or temperature wash the steel, you can get a different crystal structure. And one of those crystal structures is the crystal structure that forms certainly the majority of standard rail steel is from this crystal structure called perlite. At the time, there wasn't very much perlite rail steel at all. It was used in fact, I don't know if it was used anywhere in rails at that point, but certainly it was found that these perlitic steels were found to give the most favourable results in terms of both ductility and fracture resistance. But it did come with a reduction in strength and durability compared to the slightly softer rail steel. And also the other thing that you found was that you can't weld this perlitic steel to manganese crossings, so you need an intermediate kind of little section of a kind of what's I don't know what the I'm not a welding expert, which we'll also come to later in this episode. There's a lot that I'm going to come to later in this episode. A kind of a thin, shiny strip that if ever you're in a platform and maybe you're next to some S&C, you might see that thin, shiny strip off the front of the crossing. Kind of the crossing nose, either kind of the leg ends at the back or the nose, kind of the V fronts. You'll see where there's the crossings welded into the overall layout. You might see a shiny little strip of steel, which is the connection between the paralytic standard rails and the crossing nose. And that also can be because of the different steel makeup of the crossing itself, but that's another discussion. In any case, there were those 4 streams of research kicked off by Hither Green. It was a dramatic incident, and it really it sort of bluntly brought to bear how much safety of the track infrastructure was not well enough understood. And this kind of came about at the point where research, the research, and I kind of written a bit of a paper on this that at some point I need to turn into an article. This research ramped up, the research into actually the actual functioning of the track itself. The permanent way that infrastructure really ramped up at this point. And it came about also at the time when British rail research was becoming a thing. 67, there were some restructurings in the kind of the late 60s, but actually by this point, British rail research was starting to become a thing in a really big way. You know, people were starting to know about the advanced passenger train by that point. So people knew about the BR research, and so it was BR research who really picked up and ran with these 4 different work streams. So that was Hither Green, and we'll come back to Hither Green later on because the story didn't end with that research. We have to go to another crash. We're going to jump forwards to 1971. It's 6 p.m. Friday the 2nd of July 1971, and we're at Tattenhall Junction, which is, where is it? It's somewhere in the London Midland region. It's like, is it in Cheshire? It's in my head. It's in Cheshire area. And what's happening at Tattenhall Junction? Well, let me paint the picture for you. So at on the line between Chester and Crewe, and the train involved was it was a schools party special consisting of 10 coaches hauled by a diesel loco. It was heading from Smethwick early that morning, so Smethwick Rolfe Street, I presume in the middle of Brum, and it was taking them over to Rill for a day's outing, and so it left Rill so it was returning them all, having had their nice day on from at 17:25. It left Rill, and it was approaching Tattenhall Junction under clear signals at 70 miles an hour. What happened at 70 miles an hour? Well, right next to this bridge, this happened. A buckle formed underneath the train, and unfortunately, rather tragically, 2 children were killed in the accident, and several adults and children were severely injured in the accident as well. Really nasty crash. And this picture, in fact, is there are a lot of things going wrong in this picture. A lot of things going wrong. And certainly for me, with my modern track hat on, there are some things that I would be looking at immediately if I saw a buckle like this. Things that I would that really are a kind of a massive red flag for problems that let's say in hot weather are an issue. So lots of you will know about track buckles happening in hot weather, but a lot of people, if you pay attention to the news and to quite a lot of even railway commentators, you get the feeling that track buckles are only a problem where you've got long welded rails. This is not the case. Welded track is far better at resisting buckles than bolted track is, because, for example, you see down here, okay, it's not a particularly good resolution photo, but I see a very shiny connection between these 2 rail ends. There should be a line here, really. Likewise, on this one, there should be a line here, and this is quite close to the lens, and I'm not seeing any line. I'm just seeing a kind of a continuous. Let me just get rid of this again. I'm just seeing a continuous. If you look at this section here, there's no line at all. It's just continuous shiny strip. And actually, all of the joints were like this along here. All of them were what's called rail creep, is where rails kind of shift slightly towards either downhill or in the direction of predominant braking. You know, there's constant longitudinal forces through the rail. And certainly in older track types like this, we've got, what is this, BR1 base plates with rail springs. These are These are kind of hook springs that are part of, and this is a BR1 base plate here. Not a huge amount of toe load, which means the rails kind of over time shuffle. And what that means is where you should have. So I showed you a picture of a bolted joint earlier. Let me just get my. So this is what a bolted joint should look like. You should have the rails here. There's a rail there and another rail there. There we are. Very nice. You'll have the bolt holes. There are the bolt holes. There we are. Bolt holes. And then you have the fish plate, which will fit in here like this. And then you have the rail foot there, and then the rail head there as well, just to fill in the picture there. But this thing is very important. This gap. This is a gap which I'm going to draw on here, and people are going to shout at me for not having a Wacom. This gap is an expansion gap. And essentially, when it's cold weather, it'll be at its largest, so you have a nice big gap. And when it's hot weather, it'll be really, really small. You'll have a really small gap. And in extreme conditions, you will, you might find that the gap closes up entirely. And if all the gaps are closed, it doesn't mean you have to close the railway, but it means that at that point you need to start paying a lot more closer attention to the condition of the track. So that is one factor here that was a major issue that contributed to this buckle forming under hot weather. And in fact, I'm going to read the course of the incident. Let me just read. So I'm going to read this so that you have an idea of exactly what happened. So, in fact, I'm going to read this not quite verbatim, but broadly verbatim from the report. So the train was approaching Tattenhall Junction on the up line under clear signals at a speed of about 68 miles an hour when the jointed track in the immediate vicinity of the Brick Arch overbridge, this is overbridge number 50 here, started to deform under the train. The effect of the deformation was to throw the coaches towards the left. There we are, you can see, so that the coaches started swinging, let me get my red pen out, leftwards. They started swinging this way. And this sideways deflection became increasingly marked from about the 5th coach towards the rear of the train until the 8th, 9th and 10th coaches struck the arch of the bridge. So, and actually, you can't quite see it here, but there's actually some debris hanging from the... hanging off the bridge, because and all this was basically smashed off the train by the fact that essentially the coach, the roof of the coach, that was dismal. The roof of the coach basically had been struck like this. So essentially this part of the roof of the coach had been smashed off by the time you got to the 8th and 9th and 10th coaches. About this stage, the trailing pair of wheels on the trailing bogie of the 8th coach and most of the wheels on the 9th became derailed. So independently, the curvature was too much. The wheels became derailed. And this, together with the impact on the bridge, led to division between the 9th and 10th coaches. The 10th coach overturned onto the adjacent down line, so it kind of went this way. And came to rest 200 yards past the bridge, so kind of in the direction of where the photo was taken. The remainder of the train continued forwards, with the 8th and 9th coaches derailed. The division caused the train brakes to be applied, and about the same time, the driver, who'd kind of been warned by hand signals from the signaller in Tattenhall Junction, made an emergency brake application, and then stopped about 440 yards beyond the position that the 10th coach had kind of fallen over. The 8th coach had actually re-railed itself through the junction, but the 9th coach was entirely derailed. And so in terms of damage, this is kind of where it gets pretty grim. So there was minor damage on everything up to the 8th coach was pretty extensively damaged from the centre to the rear, especially on the left-hand side because of its striking the bridge. The 9th coach was even more extensively damaged. Damage was kind of right across the length of the roof, really. The last 10 feet of the 9th coach, the roof had been entirely ripped off, together with most of the side panelling to the vestibule and toilet compartment. And the 10th coach, both bogies had become detached, extensively damaged. The coachwork was severely damaged, kind of smashed to bits almost. The luggage compartment to the rear was completely torn away. The roof and side panelling was still here. This is it. This is the roof and side panelling of the 10th coach. And the left-hand side of the coach was pushed in for most of its length. So a lot of severe damage. Not very nice. So where are we? So this is really the... I'm getting distracted by the chat. Actually, I'm going to pay less attention to the chat while I'm describing, and then I'll come back to it after each incident. So you can basically a real mess. So I've talked about the fact that the joints were closed up. There are other issues here. The next one is what can I see in here? Can anyone see this? I can see it every time I draw on it. You can't see it, but I'm seeing the sides of sleepers here. These are timber sleepers. Also, the ballast here is the profile of the ballast here is completely flat, So I've already talked about expansion joints. So we had expansion joints. The next thing we need to talk about is ballast profiles, and particularly ballast shoulders. So when you've got the track, I'm going to draw it again here. You've got the track. Here's a sleeper, and you've got the rails are sort of sat on top. Obviously a bit further apart than that. In fact, you know what? Let's fix that by doing this. There's my very chunky base plates, and there's my rail. Kind of looks like a smiley face. Either side of the sleeper, you will expect to see what's called a ballast shoulder. So you don't have the ballast as a sort of a flat line. In almost all situations, 99% of situations, essentially, certainly in kind of running lines, in all situations, you should expect to see a nice ballast shoulder, well defined, nice heaped ballast, with a height of up to about between 200 and 300 millimeters. So quite a substantial height, and then a width of about 450 millimeters. So that's the sort of dimensions you're looking at. Now, the reason that you have this heaped ballast, more than anything else, is to hold the track in place. It's to actually sit and hold and kind of it basically acts as extra weight either side of the sleepers, and particularly on jointed track, which is more often than not wooden sleepers, so much lighter track construction. That track system's quite light. So even independent of any longitudinal forces, any risk of buckling, the track geometry will go off if you are not, over time, you've installed the track geometry, particularly through curves. If you've got trains passing through there, eventually you're going to lose the track geometry. So the ballast is there, those ballast shoulders there to hold the track in place, essentially. Also, you want to make sure, so that's the side view. If you're looking kind of in the top-down view, where we're looking at sleepers kind of here, there's sleepers and sleepers. My absolutely stunning drawing. These bits in between, these are called, they're called the beds, is one way of us describing them. And these should also all be full of ballast. Ballast. And that ballast should be up to the level of the top of the sleeper. So what I see here, with all of these sort of exposed sides of sleepers, shows that there's not enough ballast in so that they can be called cribs as well. There's not enough ballast in the cribs, in the gaps between the sleepers, and there are no ballast shoulders. So there is almost no resistance against lateral deformation of the track should the joints get blocked up and the longitudinal forces start being transferred. Large longitudinal forces start being transferred to the track. So already you've got a lot of bad things happening here. Now, why did the track buckle at this location? Why did it buckle adjacent to the bridge, which is clearly a situation? If the bridge hadn't been there, the buckle might not have been as catastrophic. The train might have stayed online. The emergency brake, the driver would have braked as a result of the signaller who kind of saw all the dust from the incident and kind of raised their hand. Why did it do that? Well, it's because if you can imagine you've got let's go white again. It's like I'm drawing on a chalkboard. A whacker would make this easier, wouldn't it? If you've got the track here, there's the track, lovely. And you've got the arch of the bridge here, and you've got your ballast here, there's your ballast. The bridge doesn't stop; it continues, and in fact, you might well have some kind of, depending on what the construction type is here of the kind of the overbridge, you've got a foundation that goes down underneath the track level, and that foundation means that for the distance, for some distance either side of this, either side of the approach to this bridge, you've got a weak point, or not necessarily a weak point, but a change, some change, which means that generally when you've got stress build-ups, and this actually comes back to Hither Green and what we're going to talk about later on, stress build-ups concentrations generally happen at some discontinuity. And in this situation, the discontinuity of stress build-up for the track, the longitudinal forces in the track, were impacted by the presence of the bridge. So that's why the deformation happened under the bridge and why the incident was so bad. And actually after this incident, and indeed the previous incident, so Hither Green as well, Hither Green, perhaps the biggest consequence that resulted from Hither Green was the massively accelerated rollout of welded track, of long welded track. And this incident really hammered that point home, that maintaining, as labour was becoming more sparse, as it was becoming harder to keep, as there were, efficiency savings being made across the rail kind of the rail network, it was becoming absolutely critical that long welded rail was rolled out across the industry, across the network, and so both Hither Green and Tattenhall really accelerated that process, which was for the better. So lots of discussions here. Michael C, is it because the area under the bridge was in the shade, so expanded at a different rate? No, I don't think so, because it's not. I mean, potentially that could have been a confounding factor, but the sun would have moved around so much that, and the stresses are transferred from quite a distance. So I doubt that shorter bridge would have had that much of an impact locally. Let's see. Right, yeah. Any questions, anyone, for either Hither Green or Tattenhall? Those two kind of come in a bit of a pair. So let's see. Oh yeah, lots of discussion here. So welcome to everyone who's with us for this evening's episode. Graham Howarth. Oh yeah, leveling up agenda indeed. John Christoph is. What's the humidity like out? Oh, I see. You're discussing temperatures. Things can get pretty hot in the UK because basically it doesn't matter where. It's all about relative temperature. So. Because the UK, we're lucky we don't have a huge temperature range. Other countries have a much larger temperature range. You know, Canada's a good example where you have continental temperatures of extremes of high and low. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, it means restressing twice a year. In the UK, we don't need to do that because and generally in Northern Europe, we don't need to do that because we have a narrower temperature range or a narrower distance between low temperatures and high temperatures. Climate change is impacting on this, I'll point out, in that we're getting more extremes of high temperature. And this is pressuring the rail infrastructure more than it has been in the past. We're also getting extremes of cold, which is pushing it in the other direction and increasing the risk of rail breaks, which is another problem if you're using axle counters everywhere because you can't pick them up. In any case, the challenge of in Britain, we don't need to re-stress twice a year. We stress once. We have a stress-free temperature of 27 degrees, which is up to 27 degrees. We have. I need to explain stressing. Basically, when you're laying long welded track, you don't just lay it in the ground and walk away. You actually cut a section out of it. You pull those rails. Let's easier if I go big face, right? You cut, so you lay the rails, you cut a gap in the rails, and you pull them together, and then you sort of weld them together. And that stress that you introduce into the rail is such that if the temperature increases, that stress reduces to zero at 27 degrees. We call that the stress-free temperature. So up to 27 degrees, you've got zero. You've got tensile stresses in the. Let's get a bit of paper. Paper always helps with this. Where's a nice? Oh yeah, here we go. Some Waterstones receipts. So here's a nice Waterstones receipt. Lovely. If I what's on this one? It's from Oban. Some nice pictures. Nice railway books. Anyway, if I pull it. We can have an example. If I pull this thin little spindly bit of paper, you see it holds its shape quite nicely, nice and straight. If I apply even the slightest little bit of compressive stress, it immediately buckles, right? Rails are pretty much the same in terms of dimension. They're very, very long and thin, kilometres long once they're all stitched together, kilometres and kilometres. If you apply a compressive stress to that, it will buckle. And that's why, so up to 27 degrees, that covers most temperature. So when you're getting hotter than 27 degrees, up to around about 60 degrees on the best track, so that the picture I showed earlier in Inverurie, up to 59 degrees, that track will be absolutely fine. We have the critical rail temperature is 59 degrees, about 60 degrees Celsius. That's the point at which you need to consider action, whether it's putting a speed on or having a watch person out to look at the track. For crap track like this stuff, the critical rail temperature, so the temperature at which the likelihood of a buckle is enough that you need to take action, is about the same as the stress-free temperature. So we have a nice form, critical rail temperature management, which this sort of initiated, this critical rail temperature management. We've had lots of incidents more recently that weren't fatal with freight that really hammered this process home. But the understanding of critical rail temperature management and managing rail stresses as a result of hot extremes of temperature, Tattenhall kicked this off in a kind of a large way. And what we have nowadays is you have a critical rail temperature management form. You fill in what type of track materials they are. You put in the temperatures that the track was stressed at, and it gives you a temperature which you need to do things. So it gives you a CRT temperature, then it gives you a CRT 5, which is where you have to put a 5 mile an hour speed on, and then it gives you a CRT, watch person's temperature, and then a close the track temperature. All good stuff. We've improved those processes much more recently. In any case, Tattenhall kicked off a lot of that. What's going on here with the chat? Anyway, yes, so... cheerio, Ella. That was short and sweet. Oh, crikey, it's 1955. Oh, good grief. We've got more incidents to talk about. Let's go to Ulleskelf. This one is not going to take long because it's a bit of a bait and switch. I am not going to talk much about Ulleskelf because it's all about welding. And I don't really know much about welding. Also, there are no pictures of Ulleskelf that I can find, the incident that is. But what I can tell you about is, if I get this up and then go to here and do open with this, is I can zoom into here and... we can talk very briefly about Ulleskelf. So on the it's 2 p.m. Tuesday the 8th of December 1981, and we had, let's go through this. Nice. This is what crash reports come from. All of the reason I mentioned Gary earlier is because all of these are available on the Railways archive, which gets its own slide plug later on. So stay tuned for that. In any case, these are what most of the reports look like, and a lot of incidents happened in the kind of basically in the year post-war and pre-privatization years. Pretty much all rail crash reports look like this. You've got a nice blue cover, and then you've got whoever was Her Majesty's Railway Inspector at the time, and then they kind of open. They've got the honour to report, and then they describe the incident. So they describe here. You've got the signalling, the track here being described. So it's being described as continuous welded rail in MRC fastening. Oh dear, MRC fastening. What a mess. And base plates, you see 113 pan rail, 113A pan rail, F27 sleepers, all good stuff. Cargo fleet 66 rail as well, so it's shambolic condition rail, I'd imagine. Good grief, I would be very unhappy. I've seen that stuff out and about, and whenever I do see it, it's generally a rip this out, replace it, please. So this is talking about the bridge and talking about the connection, and so in this situation, the locomotive passed over a broken rail. What had happened was that a weld had broken, and that resulted in a broken rail, which in turn derailed the train. And there was a fatality as a result of this incident, and it did go on to inform welding practice. Oh, let's zoom out a bit on this because we can talk about what happened. There's the picture. So it's between York and it's just north of Church Fenton. There's the line from York down towards Leeds. So a bit of track that I pass over quite a lot. You can see that this incident, it was a pretty high-speed incident. This is the equivalent of a TP service nowadays. And you can see that these two of the coaches where the fatality occurred in here and the injuries in here, two of the coaches overturned down quite a steep embankment. The others kind of continued pretty much all right. Emergency brakes were applied when the tube, the kind of the brake pipe was broken. The derailment of the overturning of these two coaches down the embankment is what resulted in the fatality. And this is where there was this the rail was broken at this weld just off the bridge. There are a lot of factors at play here, actually. Partly with the bridge, the weld being located close to a bridge was a bad thing. So that's informed our standards and that changed. I'll come to that later. But there's a lot to talk about Ulleskelf that is particularly on welding. That's essentially outside of my expertise, and we're going to get someone in to talk about welding. Thanks for shouting at me, everyone. This is why having a guest is good. Rail narrows, no, not rail narrows side by side. You want a small face. There we are. This is the thing showing. There. This is what reports look like. Thanks everyone for shouting at me. Thanks. This is the important thing. This is what the report looks like. Here we are, and I just basically came to the end where I showed the map of the layout plan showing what had happened. There you are, the derailment. There we go. Oh, thanks everyone for keeping me right. As ever, professional. This is why having the chat in the corner is good. I know, right? It's good. I have got rid of... This is lots of atting. Yeah, I need to pay more attention over to my chat. It's. I never said this was a professional outfit, right? Someone called him on his mobile. Thanks, Gary. Well, for the people who are doing this in audio only mode don't care. They're hearing exactly what they're hearing anyway. Anyway, that's Ulleskelf. I'm going to swiftly move on from Ulleskelf because we need to talk about. This is basically to say Ulleskelf. We're going to talk about the next incident, which is near Elgin, Llanbride. Yes, this is a Brythonic name that is the same as Llanbride in Wales. The Brythonic language got all over the place in Britain. In any case, 3:25 p.m. On Thursday, the 3rd of February, 1983. And so it's kind of it's probably quite a nippy afternoon, 1983. And, well, what's happened? well, this has happened again. So we've got, yes, I'm sharing now, so everyone's on there. We have got, so this one here that I'm about to draw on is the Hither Green. This is Hither Green here. This is Hither Green. And in fact, the changes that they'd made, that British Rail had made to the thickness of the rail web, so the thickness of the rail web here, this is kind of, if you can imagine the rail kind of doing this, and then it kind of has this shape, and then it kind of comes out, and there's the rail foot like this. This bit is the web. This bit, the vertical bit, it's just like an I-beam. People were doing some chatting about I-beams in the chat. So you have there's the head, there's the foot, and this is the web. This bit here is the web. There we are. I'm sharing now so everyone can see it. There we go. That's my isometric view. It's really good. Everyone can see exactly what that is rather than just an incoherent scribble. In any case, these star cracking failures had continued to happen. The problem was certainly not solved. Several further accidents result. In fact, lots of accidents kind of were happening as a result of these bolt hole failures. And in fact, it was another fatal derailment. This 1983 fatal derailment in Elgin, Lambride, that kind of essentially forced the British Rail Research Department to seek a lasting solution. So from 79 there were sort of these sort of rail end failures. There were about 200 a year happening. 200 a year. Not all of those result in derailments. There are about maybe 1 or 2 derailments a year resulting from them. But that's a significant failure that was not decreasing. There was no rate of decrease. It was continuing around about 200 throughout. Interestingly, the research that we looked at as British Rail Research came from America. Actually, it was the research was being done in Utah. So this is Elgin, but this is the Elgin derailment, by the way. In this situation, it was actually Bullhead Rail that had failed. So BS 95R. But you can see actually in this situation it was a combination of factors, because you had a situation. Actually, this is Elgin. This is another one here entirely. This is the Elgin one. You can see it's another classic diagonal kind of star cracking failure that's actually ended up with a piece of the railhead disappearing off, and that derailed the train. This is another one you can see here where you've got a failure resulting from multiple holes being drilled in the rail, which is just never do that. Don't drill holes in rails. Certainly don't flame cut holes in rails. Just don't do it. Don't do it. And you can see all of these absolutely standard. These star cracks are just very recognizable failure. Star, star, star. The Americans brought us the solution. Strangely, in a roundabout way, it went from Britain. The research that resulted in the solution went from Britain over to America and then came back again in the mid-80s. So 1985, the research had been completed in Utah that kind of incorporated a load of research, a huge body of research into metal fatigue management. It came from the aeronautical industry, because the aeronautical industry had been dealing with fatigue for a very long time. In fact, it was fatigue that had ended Britain's chances of being at the head of the charge in the development of the airliner. This thing. No, not this thing. That's a picture of the derailment at Elgin. You can see what it's not gone well here, has it? Failure in the joint, trains falling over. And actually, this one's probably fresh in the mind of some of my PWI colleagues. The chair of the York section was manager of this bit of railway when it happened, and so was there and kind of witnessed what happened. It was the unpleasant experience of sort of having to deal with the consequences of a fatal derailment. Not good. This thing here, this rather fetching looking aircraft. With its lovely square windows. There we are. This is the Comet. Very sleek-looking airliner that fell out the sky several times because it blew up. It had catastrophic depressurizations, explosive decompressions, in fact, and blew up several times because of fatigue cracking in the... Actually, it wasn't in the side windows. It was generally in the... I think there's a square window here and possibly another one in the roof, and that resulted in fatigue cracks that eventually just the whole thing just sort of fell to bits several times. One over Italy, another couple in other places as well. Not good. In any case, Comet. What's happening here? Yeah, there we are. I should get a slice of track for visualization according to Black Peach. Yeah, I really should. I do have some track in here somewhere. I just need to get my steel wool out, polish it up, and get it on and dump it on my desk. I'll get on it. That's a very good point, actually. Given that RailNet is a thing, I should probably lay that sort of junk around, shouldn't I? Anyway, Comet. And so part of this work, they put a Comet fuselage into a giant water tank and proceeded to load and unload, stress and unstress the frame lots and lots of times, cycling that loading, filling it with water and emptying it with water lots and lots and lots of times. And that's how they worked out that exactly the same failure happened. They realised that it was fatigue. GLU was the airframe that they used. Tested it to destruction, and this led to and riveting is something that it was continued to cause problems for maintenance in the aeronautical industry, through into the 80s. So they were ongoing this research, and what they discovered was that basically this what we now call cold bolt hole expansion is where you kind of use an expendable kind of lubricated sleeve called a mandrel, that you drill the hole. Using that, you drill a hole, cleanly, properly drill a hole with proper equipment, put in the mandrel and use an expansion device to then essentially create a compressive pre-stressing. So if you've got the hole, let me get my white thing out here. I realise we're already late, folks. It's 6 minutes past 8. It's already happened. We're not far off, I promise. There's a bolt hole. So what you do is you kind of insert this sort of this sleeve thing. You kind of pop this sleeve thing in, and then you expand it out. You kind of expand it, and in doing so, you push it out, and then when you remove the sleeve, you get rid of the sleeve in the bin. That goes in the bin, and what you're left with is a hole with lots of little compressive stresses right the way around. Kind of right the way around the whole hole, and if you can imagine, if you get a little crack forms, it gets closed up by these compressive stresses. So that's why it's a good thing. So it essentially solves the problem. It basically makes the problem go away. So so long as you undertake the cold bolt hole expansion process. So that was really, it's rolled out across the network from 1988 onwards, and the number of failures plummeted. So that basically solved the problem. Next incident is the most recent incident, and probably one that's fresh in the mind of a lot of people who are here watching this video. It's Hatfield, and we're going to go back to this picture. This is, and I think I've talked about this already, haven't I? I talked about it when we talked about ways for rails to fail. This is what is it? From here all the way through to here is 35 meters of rail, and it's shattered into about 200 pieces, shattered like ceramic. I was talking about getting that, that 5p piece. That's not what 5p's look like, but I've tried to draw 5p there. That 5p piece, you have to get that 5p piece right. You have to get that contact between the wheel and the rail right. It's my, as a permanent engineer, design engineer, it's my responsibility to do my best to make sure that interface is got right, and then it then passes on to the infrastructure manager, the maintainer, the asset manager, to ensure that interface, that contact patch, that is essentially the contact between the contact point between the train and the infrastructure is maintained as close to perfectly as possible, certainly within tolerance. I'm going to go to another picture which shows the incident. So here we are. Really unpleasant to kind of be reminded of it, but the train derailed. In fact, I can read the sort of and this is probably the most detailed description of the mechanism of the derailment. So this is what I'm going to read, so you have an understanding of what happened. It's a very long report. So there we are. That's the course of derailment. It's a very long sequence of events. So, to give you an idea of how this worked out, this is kind of basically what happened. We'll come and you can look at these pictures, and we'll talk a little bit while I'm describing this incident. I want you all to come back and tell me what this rail is. Everyone in the chat, unless you know the answer immediately, don't answer. Don't spoil it for everyone. But what is that rail? While you think about that, I'm going to read this. So the train was going northwards. So it was going locomotive first. Is that right? Is that the right round? I think that is right, isn't it? Is that right, or maybe that's wrong? In any case, the locomotive, that must be right, because the locomotive was first. So the locomotive with all wheels railed passed over the position of the derailment. and the markings on the wheels of the locomotive indicate that the wheels passed over a rail fracture, and that suggests that the fracture happened as had happened as the locomotive passed over. So the locomotive and the vehicles, the coaches behind it, passed over this rail, but the rail was clearly fragmenting under the train because the markings on the wheels of the subsequent coaches show increased markings from more cracks than the locomotive did, the Class 91 at the front. And indeed, fragments of rail start striking the undersides of coaches A and B. So you can see that bad things are happening at this point. And the three leading vehicles, all of them still travelling at around about 115 miles an hour, continue with all wheels railed on the down fast line, despite the fact that they'd gone over this disintegrating bit of rail. Coaches C, D, E, and F encountered the fractured rail with all the bits everywhere and became derailed. And in the process, those vehicles contributed to an increased amount of severity of the rail fragmentation. So what had been a short stretch of disintegrated rail started extending through a rail that had, really because of the site conditions, had these micro fractures in it that we'll talk about in a second, right the way through it for a huge long length. At this point, bogies, so the bogies from these vehicles had detached at this point, but because of the wire kind of straps connecting them, the suspension fittings and the design of the coaches, these bogies generally remained in place despite having essentially sheared off the vehicle. Coach C started displacing to the left-hand side of the down fast line, by which that means, let me get the red pen over here. There, the red pen. Started displacing in, that's not very clear at all. Maybe white was a better idea. Let's go with yellow. Started displacing in this direction here. You can see by the overall way the train was going, or where it ended up. So coaches A and B continued northwards. So this is actually a picture in the. Let me have a think. This is yeah, that's fine. So the train continued northwards, still railed and coupled, followed by C, D. So that's A and B. You can see a rail. That's the locomotive, and this is all the colours here. Maybe purple is going to be better. So here we are. This is coach A and B and the locomotive, and then C, D, E, and F were derailed. And at this stage, at this point in we're barely fractions of a second into the derailment. At this point, the service coach and the two first class coaches and the DVT, the driving van trailer, were still railed and south of the fracture track in the derailment zone. The service car then came into contact with and passed over what was just basically now just sleepers with no rail on one side. And this vehicle, as with the previous four vehicles, became derailed, but the debris evidence indicates that at this point the bogies from the service coach became detached. These bogies and the substantial overturning forces caused the service coach to rotate onto its left-hand side. So, if you can imagine the fact that one rail has just totally disappeared, the train, with increasing lengths of rail being disintegrated, at this point probably the full length of a coach of rail was disintegrated, and the coach rolled over, and that motion of it rolling as it started onto these broken sleepers, it continued that rolling motion, and you can see that it can continue this rolling motion and was being pulled over as it was rolled over. Essentially, there's evidence of blue paint on the down slow line at 118 meters beyond the point at which the derailment had started. Only 73 meters north from the most southerly part of the derailment zone. And so the coach had overturned, basically, as soon as it encountered that zone of disintegrated rail, it started overturning. And it swung out leftwards at this point, and pretty rapidly after being fully overturned, it struck an overhead line mast. It struck one of these OLE masts. In fact, this one specifically, you can see what's happened. And in doing so, it was brought to an abrupt halt, a rather tragic and abrupt halt. So this, let me just go down here. So, so this mast. Let me just get this right. Let me see. I just need to make sure I've got that. Yeah, so this mast basically was torn from its base, penetrated the roof of the service coach, became embedded in it. Debris from the service coach was ejected and distributed into the cess. The leading 8 vehicles then slowed down because of the effects of a mixture of wheel braking and the resistance to the ballast, but also this strike. And the service coach continued. So actually, this isn't the one it struck. It struck the previous one. It struck the previous OLE mast, and then and then was brought to rest by striking this one here, which will be presumably about 50 meters beyond. So it was struck and disintegrated a mast, which is still embedded in it, kind of a previous span behind, and then it was brought to rest. You can see all the debris sprayed out here. I'm going to get rid of the picture, don't worry. You can see all the debris sort of sprayed out kind of in this section here, and the OLE mast is just out of shot down this direction. So this is now 400 meters beyond this point where the bits of rail had all disintegrated everywhere. And so basically, kind of this mechanism explains really what, you know, that service coach really was damaged, severely damaged. The trailing vehicles had been kind of embedded deeply into this, so that they kind of followed the service coach, but because of the gap of rail, they embedded deeply into the ballast and essentially broke the coupler between the service coach and the preceding and the kind of the following coaches, and so that very abruptly stopped behind kind of, and so there's you can see an image of the two coaches in the DVT kind of parked not much beyond the field. In fact, you can see them. I think that you can see them. I'm just trying to get my bearings in what's where. I think that's probably them there. You can see them kind of parked, kind of a bit further beyond where that kind of the disintegration of the rail was. Anyway, that is that script. Right, there's a good question there, which Gary Keener can answer. Black Peach asks, do the OLE have any kind of ground fail protection? Gary Keener provides the answer, no, they don't. Do they have like a frangible design like street lamps? No, they don't have that. That's Gary's answer for everyone. Yeah, lots of people are now going to come up with the invariable questions of, do we make OLE masts too strong? No, we do not, because we should not be designing our infrastructure system to deal with derailed trains in this sort of much of a catastrophic condition. We don't design OLE masts to be too strong. They're designed to be just as strong as they need to be. That's my take on it, particularly in this particular situation of OLE masts. No, I don't think we do. I'm sure Gary will probably back me up on that. There's probably a huge long discussion about the extent to which OLE masts incorporate the kind of the design, but they're sufficiently far from the cess. They're sufficiently far from the cess that they shouldn't be in it. You shouldn't have trains derailing in that way to strike them. Has anyone worked out what this rail is yet? Has it been? Let's see. Oh yeah, it's a good point. Alstor points out a good bit of trivia. That's a good bit of trivia, which is that the 91123 was the loco involved in this derailment. It's also the loco that was then involved in Great Heck later on, and so when they actually, it was 91023 at the time, wasn't it? So when they then did a bit of an upgrade to them and it became 911, should have been 91123. They updated it instead. They got rid of that and they called it 91132, and it's still out and about on the network. Go and say hello to it. Either a lucky or an unlucky train, depending on how you look at it. Is anyone else having issues with it? I should be coming through fine with the pictures. You might just need to refresh your screen if you're having issues. So Gary Keener, basically Gary's making the point. OLE is not like lamppost or road signs, which carry little more than wind loading, and they're very small. OLE masts have to be incredibly strong because they're carrying a huge amount of tension, a huge amount of weight of steel and copper, as well as a tremendous amount of force. A tremendous amount of load in terms of tension of those. We don't just kind of neatly hang them on like kind of a clothesline. These things, high-speed OLE is a tension system. It's a complex tension dynamic system, and so those masts have to be strong enough to carry those loads. And particularly in this situation, they're carrying the loading from 8 different spans. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Different spans load are being transferred into that one mast, so make it light and it will fail in other ways without trains near. It'll fail and trains will hit it. You don't want that to happen. This rail here, I haven't spotted anyone saying what this rail is. There are a ton of suggestions. People just need to scroll up. Keener cheated because Keener probably knew it already. This was a dark day for the industry. Yes. Yeah, there's lots of people that saying yes, it is the replacement rail that was meant to go in. Ella's right. If Ella's still here, I think she might have gone, but yeah, that's right. It is indeed the replacement rail, and it had been sat there for absolutely ages, with the intention of it being replaced and not being replaced. So, number one, this was a failure primarily as a result of bad management practice. It kind of was one of the last few incidents that really put the boot in to having privately owned and run infrastructure. It was a terrible idea, and it has now ended, and hopefully will never be reversed. Because having, particularly with Railtrack were a kind of a management consultancy that happened to be in charge of railway infrastructure. They saw themselves as management consultants. They did not see themselves as operators of a railway with all the responsibilities and need for knowledge and wisdom that requires. So that's the number one reason why Hatfield happened. But the other reason why Hatfield happened is because of fatigue cracking through a very long, shallow curve. So you've got a very long, shallow curve, and again, it's another form of fatigue cracking. So it's not fatigue cracking in a joint in the bolt hole like you had at Hither Green and in Elgin. It's not a fatigue failure of a weld, which was a contributing factor to Ulleskelf. No, this was a fatigue failure of the physical steel section itself. And that steel section, what you get what's called kind of head checking, which you get these very obvious telltale sort of... let me go big face. This time I'm not going to forget to unbig face, because I'm just going to leave this up in front of me so I remember. You have you've got the rail, and in fact, I'm going to go back to no big face because I'm going to draw it. I'm going to draw what head checks look like because they're so distinctive. Head checks look like this. They have... So if you've got the head of the rail, if you're looking kind of side on at the head of the rail, and kind of this is... If I do a bit of a... if I kind of do the cross section, and kind of the rail head looks like this. And so this is the kind of curving over bit at the top of the rail. The head checks kind of look like this. And they kind of have these sort of very distinctive kind of cutting, and I think I showed pictures of this in the rail failure, and they often have these little sort of other diagonal sort of shapes, and they look fairly innocuous when you sort of see... So this is the kind of the head of the rail here. They look fairly innocuous when you look at them kind of without understanding what's going on inside, but actually what's happening, if you kind of take a slice of what's happening inside the rail, these are telltales for a crack, for cracks inside the rail. So this is a section of a kind of a slice of our rail now. There's the position of the rail head. Actually, these are hiding cracks that can run right down deep inside the rail, and indeed had done. That's what had happened here. All these cracks had sort of reached the point of no return. They were kind of catastrophic crack length, and the thing just shattered like glass. There we are. Indeed, yeah. So Gary Keener pointing out the needs. Oh, Dan P is with us. Yeah, so the RCF, so they kind of have this sort of Y shape, but actually they look kind of, yeah, you could describe it as an S shape. They kind of look like this sort of kind of shape. There's pictures on the rail failure one that Dan was with us last time. But in any case, this sort of shape here is very distinctive. It's very, very distinctive. I mean, I suppose I could try and find that shape. Actually, let's go into here because I bet there's a picture I can pull up. Bear with me a second. I'm going to get the picture. There will be a picture. Ah, there, perfect. So if I go into here and pull up this report here, open with, get this up. So we need to go down to the appendices for this one, and I said there are going to some sort of unpleasant. Yeah, you can see the condition of. So you can see what happens. So you can see the coaches here. There's 912. Anyway. There we are, and you can see the service coach having been... There's the service coach there. You can see these are the coaches that Coach H dug in and fell to one side, but didn't really make much progress, and wasn't... Basically didn't suffer nearly as much as the service coach, Coach G, did. Anyway, that's kind of not the point for this one. We want to go up and look at the head checking. There we are. There we go. This is what the head checks look like. This is what the... there we are. This is what some of these cracks look like. It's not very... what are you doing? Why's that happened? No, come on. I'm using Edge because Edge I don't know why I'm using edge. I have no excuses. There's the shattered rail. There's what the rail head looked like through here. You can see it's falling to bits. Lots of these checks, lots of bits of kind of shelling with the rail kind of falling to bits. Just not good. Really not in good condition. And you can see these kind of, if you cut the slice in the rail, you can see that these fractures are just wrecking. They're just wrecking the cross sectional area of the rail and weakening it hugely. Oh yeah, here's some pictures of the wheels to show what the wheels had suffered as they'd gone over the top. Anyway, lots of stuff in there, as well as, of course, images of the condition of the site for people inside this train suffering as a result of our failure as an industry. You can see what's happened here. The absolute mess in the service coach, just absolutely tragic. Really, really appalling. Yeah, not good. Not good. So, that was Hatfield. And so these are all the incidents here. These are all of the various incidents that I've listed in kind of today's episode. So, you've got Hither Green that we started with, Tattenhall, which is about the... So Hither Green was the bolt hole, fatigue cracking failure resulting in there we are. So, it's bolt holes. Tattenhall was the lateral buckling. Ulleskelf was the failure of a welded joint. Elgin was again another bolt hole failure. And then Hatfield was about fatigue cracking of the rail. And Hatfield resulted in 4 fatalities. It was a very high-speed incident. You notice all of these are high-speed incidents. In order to get fatality with a failure like this, generally you need to be going at decent speeds, because even weak coaches like Mark 2s, Mark 1s, 2s and 3s, which are not very... For nowadays... none of those are very crash-worthy coaches, but even with Mark 1s that are incredibly uncrash-worthy, speeds less than 50 miles an hour, generally they're still good enough they're robust enough to survive those energies, but much above that, and the energies become too much for those coaches to cope with. So those are those incidents. These are the incidents, and overall, so I've talked about kind of what we've learned as an industry. We've got a much better understanding, particularly after Hatfield. Hatfield kicked off a huge amount of development of understanding crack propagation, fatigue propagation, the way that rails behave under loading. They still influence the way that we design. So one of the things that influences the way that these cracks form is how much cant we apply to the track. It's how much we tilt it over. Please tell me I'm still good. How much tilt kind of cant we apply. So that's where you cant is where you've this is a sleeper with 0 cant, and here is a sleeper with lots of cant applied to it. And the amount of the amount of cant we apply depends on how much lateral force we want to, or lateral accelerations through curves we want to balance out. And generally we don't balance them all out. We balance about 50% of them out, and because we want some lateral force for steering curve purposes, for actually because you want to distribute the loads, but also because not all the trains are going at full speed through that curve. So there are all sorts of reasons why you don't apply cant to match perfectly those lateral forces, and the extent to which you balance that cant influences the formation of these sorts of fatigue failures on both the low and high rail. You get different types of cracking forming on the low and high rail depending on where that balance of lateral accelerations is. So we've had influences on management. We've had it from an engineering perspective. I'm ignoring the overall management issues that resulted in Railtrack going kaput and Jarvis going kaput. You've got engineering management. You've got understanding of from a design perspective what we need to do to get the rails to behave right, and also we've got even more improved systems for looking for those cracks. So not just ultrasonics now, but also you've got eddy current testing of rails on the move to make sure that we're spotting these issues. Also, you've got the plane line pattern recognition train, and some of the other network rail kind of yellow trains pick up visual images of the railhead. So if they're spotting those cracks forming visually in the top of the rail, we've just developed a far better understanding. But how does that kind of work in practice? So generally, all this stuff filters into the RSSB. Grief, it's half past already. This got longer. I was hoping this would be a short one. This stuff all filters into the RSSB, the Railway Safety and Standards Board, which in turn they do extra research, and that research ultimately feeds back into the standards. So what standards do we have here? We've got the European TSIs, we've got the British standards and the Euronorms up here, What are these? These are the railway group standards. These are kind of, so these ones are all, well, certainly these two are both the kind of the legally binding framework within which we design railways. And then down here we've got the network rail standards, the two main track ones, 2102 and 2049, the design and construction track and the TDH. There's the TDH, Track Design Handbook. This isn't illegal. These aren't legal documents, but they do form part of the legally binding risk kind of license for Network Rail to run the infrastructure. So I wouldn't get very far as a design engineer if I suggested I wasn't going to pay attention to these. But the railway group standards and the TSIs, the technical specifications for interoperability, the EU regulations, EU Commission regulations rather, these European Commission regulations, sorry, but they are EU standards basically. These are legal. These are legally binding documents, and hopefully the TSIs still will be post Brexit, frankly, because they're a good set of standards for us to generally, if nothing else, for our engineers to understand, because most of the world is starting to get, well, a lot of the world is starting to use TSIs as their standard set of design requirements. So for us to stop using and understanding it would be a really bad move. Anyway, they filter into standard, and standards don't stand still; they constantly develop. As we develop our understanding of the railway, of forces, and indeed as the way that we use the railway changes, these standards update as well. New technologies for assessment, for maintenance, for new processes, all that stuff filters through, and as we as designers, we can filter into those as well. So we feed into, as a designer, if there's something that's coming up that I think is wrong, or is something that I can challenge it. I can challenge it with the RSSB, and it will get, if enough people are making the same challenge, it will get, or indeed if enough people are doing something slightly different from the standards. The standards are kind of an accepted practice, but if we're doing something that doesn't shift or avoid managing the risk, but just manages the risk in a different way, if enough people do it in a different way, that'll eventually become part of the standards as well. But you have to exhibit that you're managing that risk in the same way. You're making things either as safe or safer than they are already. And there's all sorts I could talk about that, but that's how we learn from these tragic incidents. 2031, it's time we ended. That was a whiz through. I don't know what anyone's learned from that, if anything, but I just wanted to go through those incidents and how they've influenced the way that plain line permanent way looks today. Yes, and that's how we end up with plain line track looking really sexy, like this lovely picture from this is like the Staffordshire Alliance, the poster boy of the Staffordshire Alliance. This is the Norton Bridge kind of diversion, the new bit of railway line built to avoid a silly flat junction, and then build a grade separate one elsewhere. Anyway, it's quite a nice picture, some very straight track. That's nice, isn't it? West Coast Main Line. Anyway. Are RSSB the successor to BR Research? Asks Chris McKenna. No, they're not. To an extent, they've occupied. They do drive some of the research, but no, they're not. The industry is lacking a single focus of research. Theoretically, bodies like UCRIN, which is pulling all the universities kind of together, are supposed to emulate that. But we are so far from the body of research, the volume of research that was done by BR, so far from it just now, and it's a great shame, because at the point at which we talk about the fact that now is the time for all these wonderful, great innovations, we are continuing to not invest at the same. If you want innovation, you need to have an industry-led and well-funded body that drives research that industry understands, and that's kind of what UCRIN's supposed to be. But jury's still out, and the RSSB almost acts in that role, if you like, as targeting where research needs to happen, and they have a lot of their own kind of reports, the TI number reports that they do, that you can go in and most people can. I think most of them are available for all the public to see. Theoretically, all of them are, but their website's a bit clunky. But yeah, worth going in. Yeah, a pleasure. Thanks everyone who's saying they learned a lot. Are problems still around on heritage railways? Yeah, good grief. I'll probably do a rail natter on the failures that heritage railways see, and give you instructions if anyone runs or works on heritage railways of what you need to be looking out for and doing to fix some of these problems. Because I've done all of the above. I've got the experience on the big railway, but actually I've done track walking and infrastructure management on heritage railways myself, so I can give you a bit of a steer on the things that need to happen there, and all within a budget of an assumed budget of £0 a year as well. Right, that's that for the rail natter. Thanks everyone. As ever, I don't know how that worked in audio form, lots of pictures, but given that I was doing a bad job of getting the pictures in the right place, probably works better in audio form than it did in visual form. Never mind. What a show. Yeah, do indeed keep listening. Thanks to Giel for putting them up on the system. At some point, Giel's going to get bored of doing this and he'll get a life, and I'll be lost because I'll have no one who can actually make these into magical podcasts from what they are now. The usual adverts. Patreon. Wait a minute, I should probably make my face disappear briefly, shouldn't I? Patreon and Discord and PayPal. All of it. You know what happens in these things. I've said it enough times in these episodes. What else? The Railways Archive. Gary Keener is with us. Gary, that was a chaos episode. Not a particularly great recommendation of in any case, I'm waffling. Basically, all of the reports I look at come from the Railways Archive. And even when I did my thesis, which was on this sort of stuff years and years ago, I've not made a good account of myself for kind of understanding this stuff in detail, but theoretically I sort of do because I wrote my thesis on it, on rail failures, with a Heritage Railway context, actually. Graham... was it Graham? Oh, in any case, whoever was suggesting the Heritage... no, it was David. Sorry, forgive me. It was David Shepherd. Yeah, with a view on Heritage Railways. In any case, I relied heavily on the Railways Archive. And it's at the point now, I think very recently, reached the point where the Railways Archive has almost in total saturation of incident reports now. Gary, correct me on that, right? There's going to be a 45-second delay. But I think that, it's pretty much got everything now, right? I saw a tweet thread by the Railways Archive explaining such, so that's really good. Gary, this picture, this is like, the website is good, but it's maybe a bit, mid 2000s-y, but that's fine. Is that possibly why Gary's lolling? Because the logo of the Railways Archive. This is like double resolution. I had to blow it up, and you can count the pixels. In any case, it's a fantastic website, and if not being advertised, it deserves your support. But it's a fantastic resource for all sorts of things, not just crash reports, but also loads of fantastic documentation across the British Rail eras. That doesn't sound good. You got about 1,000 still to publish. I think they're still they're generally the minor incidents, though, right? And that's out of lots and lots and lots of other reports. It's a vast minority. Loads of other interesting documents. There's loads of stuff about APT on there, for example, which is quite fun. Lots of great documentation, honestly. Really, really good resource. Gary Keener, the website is awful, just go for the content. I didn't say it, Gary did. It's not awful, actually. It works fine. I'm sure people with like time and money and who aren't full-time engineers could come up with a better one, but that's not what the people who run the website are, is it, Gary? In any case, Railways Archive, go there. If you're interested in things that look like trains moving around, the latest episode of this happened earlier the week. It's been quite fun, actually. I've enjoyed it. Episode 11 was earlier this week, and I might do another one, and I might do another stream this week, but we'll see. Engineer plays, and I cock around with railways in history, and it's kind of fun. Right, more importantly, what's happening this Christmas for Rail Natter, because I'm taking a holiday. You've got 3 episodes coming up, all pre-recorded, but you should join live anyway, because they'll be coming up as premieres, and they're good episodes. They're really good, fun episodes. This one is actually not been recorded yet, because I'm recording it with Bonnie early. I think I'm recording it with Bonnie on the Tuesday night before the Wednesday night. Don't worry about it. It was because of the breakdown that happened last Rail Natter with tech caused the other one to be delayed as well. Don't worry about it. In any case, 3 episodes. You're getting the tease. So unusually, the Patreon people normally know exactly what episodes are coming months in advance, or a few of the ones that are happening months in advance. But everyone's getting the tease this time because it's Christmas, and otherwise I won't be able to advertise them. So episode 41. What do the railways do at Christmas? Bonnie is joining us to talk about. Bonnie Price is joining us to talk about what the railways get up to at Christmas. Just be our respective perspectives. I'll share a bit what I get up to. She'll share a bit what she gets up to. And we'll explain why things happen at Christmas and work that happens at Christmas and New Year, why it's not spread out in the rest of the year. Should be an interesting discussion, that one. Bonnie's a lot of fun and also hugely knowledgeable and also hugely responsible. She has a seriously major project that she's working on at the moment that hopefully she'll talk a bit about. The next episode is going to be, crikey, I'm 2038, episode 42, Snow versus Railways. We're going to talk about Snow, and Alex Priestley and I, and his Christmas bow tie. And we're going to talk about Snow and what Snow does to railways. It's kind of like a spin-off from his Weather versus Railways episode. And that'll be, when will that be? So that's, episode 41 will be the 23rd of December, which means that episode 42 will be the 30th, presumably, actually. In any case, this will be just before Christmas, and then in the interbellum between Christmas and New Year. And then in the New Year, the first 2021 Rail Natter episode will be with Justin Rosniak of Well, There's Your Problem podcast. And he's going to be talking to us about the fact that US railroads can actually be good. They can be good, actually. We're going to find out about that. Or maybe we're not, because half the time we ended up saying, oh, that's actually really annoying, and Justin would laugh about something being odd. But it was a really, really fun episode. Justin's brilliant fun. So everyone is going to be joining that very long episode. Good grief, it ran on long. The Alex one was quite short. We kept that nice and snappy. The Justin one was quite long. We did not keep that snappy. I've edited it down, and it's still 2 hours. I can only apologise. But it's slow form podcasting, right? You'll just kind of catch up with it a bit. Right. So that was that. All it remains for me to do is sort of say, is catch my breath and say, yeah, we're widening the canon. Well, There's Your Problem podcast is now, we're integrating Rail Natter into the Well, There's Your Problem podcast universe. I don't know what that means. In any case, thanks to everyone for joining. Gary, Dan, good to see you both here. Ella and Sarah and David and Phil and Bjarn and everyone. It's been Chris. Oh, it's lovely to see you all. Julie as well. Good to see you, Julie. I'm glad you enjoyed this one. Found it interesting. That was a fun episode. Sorry, I did a hackneyed job of it, but yeah, you know what my brain's like, dashing all over the place. Hopefully, the point of these isn't that you come out of it having encyclopedically learned things. It's hopefully it kind of makes you kind of think, or kind of equips you with ideas of what to Google to learn more about it, I suppose, is what Rail Natter facilitates. In any case, we've been running for so long now. How long is it? An hour 41 minutes. I'm so sorry. I'll see you in the new year for the live one. These next ones, I'll not try and drop into the chat, but in any case, have a really good Christmas. Flip the V's at 2020. What a year it's been. And have a nice holiday season. Yuletide greetings, one and all. I'm an atheist, so I don't really believe in Christmas, so whatever. But the Christmas holiday is nice. Yuletide greetings all, season's greetings, and more importantly, happy Hogmanay to everyone. Make sure you get absolutely tonto, unless you've got a kidney problem, in which case, or a liver problem. I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah. And do so obviously from a safe location. Don't do it if you're then going to go to work the day after. That's important to know. Like, that's our safety moment. Get drunk, but do so responsibly. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio. Bye. Cheerio.